Hello and welcome to another video with hot tech tips. Today we're going to look at a video that's going to describe a undocumented function or formula within Excel that's called the DateDif function. Now the DateDif function lets you calculate the difference between two dates when they span more than a year, or even when they, if you do a regular date function to subtract, it gives you this Julian number that you have to then convert later. But the DateDif function will give you the results in numbers of years, months, days between two different dates, even if it spans a year. So here I've got the DateDif codes you can choose from. The Y is for year, M is for month, D is for days. And then I'll talk about these other three at the end of the video. They're more of a financial type of function that you might need, not what the standard person would need if they want to do some type of calculation, like how many days have I lived, something like that. So this one is going to be a retirement calculator, basically how many days until I retire. So first I'm going to just use the function to get today's date, and that is today. And so it returns today's date. And then let's say, for instance, I want to retire on January 1, 2030. So I want to calculate how many years is that, how many months is that, how many days. So the DateDif function works like this. Equals, to call up a formula, date, and you see how date and date value are there, but DateDif doesn't show up. It's undocumented. DateDif, open parentheses, and it takes three arguments. The first is the earlier date. It has to be earlier than the second part of the formula and separated by comma. The second date, and then the code, and the code has to be in double parentheses here. So we'll do year within parentheses, within quotations, double quotations, I'm sorry. And then close the formula. 14 years. So now what I want to do is just copy this formula down. But if you've watched previous videos about Excel, you'll know that these are relative cell references here. So if I copy this, for instance, it's going to change to 0 because my cell reference is updated. Now it's referring to the row below. So if I do not want that to change, I have to change these references into absolute references. So I'll go back up here, click on this cell reference, and if you hit F4, it will cycle through the different cell references. There is absolute for the row and column, absolute for the row, absolute for the column, and then back to relative. So I'll hit F4 to make both row and column absolute, and then I'll do the same with this cell reference, F4. And now my cell, both of my cells will stay here when I copy it down. So I'll hit enter to grab that, and you see it saved it up here. So now if I copy down, it will keep my references absolute, and I simply have to change now the code 168 months. If I copy that code again, it stayed absolute to these cells, and I'll change this to day, 5,000 days. So how could you use this in another way? You could say, well, how much money, let's say I want to get, I want to save up $50,000 and I want to save that before I retire. I always want to make this a currency so it looks nice. Alright, so now I can say, how much do I have to save per year, month, or day? So I'll use this. I'll say equals this number divided by this number. That's how much I have to save every year for 14 years. So I'm going to go back and make my F11 absolute. And then I will drag this down. Now you see how it took the location for I5. When I drag that down, since I5 was relative, it copied I5 down. So I'd have to save 297. And if I want to know how much per day, I simply copy this down, $9 per day. And that's without any interest. That's just straight. If I wanted to have $50,000 in 14 years, that's how it would go. So now let's take a look at these other functions here. The YM code, it means the number of months in the current year. And this one is the number of days in the current year. And then this one here, MD, just means the current without the month or the day. This is the current days so far in the current month. So this is a nice, easy retirement calculator and a good introduction to the DateDif function. Use it to your, you could come up with 1,000,001 uses for it. There's a lot of times when you want to calculate, like how many days have I been born, how many days have I worked at a job, things like that. So it's pretty easy to calculate. So I hope you enjoy that hot tech tip today. Thanks for watching.